right now. I'm recording locally, so Zoom is not warning you that this is being recorded, but I'm telling you I just started the recording. The only thing that is recorded is my main screen and my video input. Nothing you type in chat gets recorded, right? So feel free to participate a few times that I will be asking you some questions. So again, as I said, I see we have quite a diverse audience, so welcome everyone from all over the world. So I hope you're going to be finding today's session useful. If you have any questions at any point in time, feel free to ask it in chat. So you can either send me a private message or ask the entire chat, a public message. It's really up to you, whatever works for you. All right? Yes. Excellent. So I'm just going to get started here with a brief land acknowledgement. So Montreal, also known as Jojage, is located on unceded indigenous lands of the Ghanaian-Gahaga Nation. To learn more about the various treaties and lack thereof in the case of the Montreal region and the native lands that the different areas are situated on, I'd highly encourage you to have a look at this website. So nativeland.ca is a really interesting website when you have a moment. All right. All right, so let's talk about budgeting. Now, most of the things that I'll be talking to you about today, a lot of it is not rocket science. A lot of it is very, very evident, obvious. And you might be thinking, well, if it's so simple, like budgeting, the key concept of budgeting seems to be so simple, right? So easy. So how come that so many people seem to be struggling with it, right? For example, one of the key core concepts of budgeting, right? And this kind of makes intuitive sense, right? You don't need a PhD in finance to figure this one out, right? Is in order to figure out how much money you're spending on things, well, what's the first step that you have to do? Well, track where your money is going, right? Am I spending too much money on new car tires, or am I spending too much money on new shoes? Or am I spending too much money on coffee, right? Random examples, obviously, but if you don't track your expenses, you do not know, right? So first thing is just track your expenses. Pretty simple, right? And then live within your means, right? Once you figure out where your money goes, just make sure you spend less money than you make. That's living within your means, and you should be okay, right? Seems simple. Yet a lot of people struggle, and not only people that are in the lowest income brackets, right? Another thing that this one is a bit trickier. It's very difficult when you're a student to do this one, but this is what the experts recommend once you're an average individual. The average person obviously is no longer a student. So obviously here, the save 10% of your income or more, that's kind of the long-term ideal number, that or any larger than that, ideally, X number of years down the line after you graduate. As a graduate student, saving 10% of your income might work for a small sub portion of you, especially those of you that might be still living with your parents, or if you're, again, as we've seen from the little little poll that we had here, a large number of you were non-locals, i.e., from other parts of Canada, the US, or globally from a lot of different countries. As a result, some of you might be fortunate enough and your parents might be paying a portion or all of your expenses. Others, you might have to, work and sort of, pay for your own, for all of your own expenses, which, will very much limit how much free money you have. So again, this is an aspirational goal here, but this is a number that you probably have heard of in the media and the news, right? Yet very few people actually manage to do this, even the people that are actually, have graduated and are no longer students. So the basics. So again, once you graduate, once you get a higher income, this is key, and especially this word save here should really be more save/invest, right? Does anyone know the difference between saving and investing? And if you're shy, send me a private message. Otherwise, just type it to the entire chat. What's the difference between saving and investing? Both are important, right? And budgeting is really the core sort of basis of all of this, is the foundation of it all, right? But there's saving, investing, and budgeting are all intertwined. If you don't budget, you won't have enough money to save. And if you don't have any savings, you won't be able to convert some of those savings into long-term investments. So I kind of gave you the answer there. So the main difference between saving and investing is that savings, those emergency savings that everyone tells you, or a lot of people might have, you might have heard people tell you, should have between 3 and 6 months worth of emergency savings just in case. Those are low risk, immediately accessible. Investments are really made for long term. It's basically money that you don't need in the short term. It's long term money basically. So typically for investments, I would say, or most financial advisors would recommend to go with anything that is 5 years plus, right? 5 years plus, right? That would be investing. If you're looking at short term, basically 1 to 2 years, that should be savings. The 2 to 5 year time horizon, for some people that should be savings, for some people that should be investing, depending on how much risk you're willing to tolerate. All right. But again, there's no savings or investing without budgeting first. So that's sort of those are kind of the overarching concepts. Now, the question is, what are the little things you can do and the big things you can do in order to help you spend less money on the things that you need to spend on? Food primarily, rent, right, as a student, will be your largest expense typically. So those are the obvious things. Now, as I said before, budgeting seems to, despite the simplicity of it all, it seems to be very difficult for a lot of people. And if you're just looking at statistics, there's not a week that goes by without having one or two new polls, new findings come out and sort of reiterate some of these findings here. For example, 48% of Canadians are within $200 of insolvency. What does that mean? It means that once people's bills are paid, at the end of the at the end of the month, they have less than $200 per month left over once all of their bills are paid. So almost half of Canadians are in that situation. Now you might be saying, well, Alex, that's understandable. Right now we're going through a period of high inflation. There's various world events that are still, impacting supply chains, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Prices are skyrocketing. Gas is as expensive as it's pretty much ever been in some cases, or as expensive as it's been in the last 30 or 40 years, depending on what country you're looking at. And you might say, well, COVID, yes, is mostly kind of over. Now it's more of an endemic. It's no longer a pandemic. So obviously people are struggling financially. Well, I'm sorry to tell you, but this statistic has been consistent for probably the last decade and a half, 2 decades in Canada. And this particular reference that I'm using here is from October 28th, 2019. What pandemic? What war in Ukraine? What high gas prices, right? It has nothing to do with those. So things have only gotten worse, is my point, since then, right? So, and keep in mind, most people are not students. If you're a student, you're like, yeah, well, you know what? Yeah, right now I'm struggling. I'm, $200 at the end of the month. That's a pretty good amount, right? For a student, having an extra $2,400 per year in savings and investments, that's not half bad, right? Most students probably make between $20,000 and $25,000. Some of you probably will make even less than that, right? But most students make between $20,000 and $25,000. So this $200 per month left over, that would be about 9.8% or thereabouts. That's pretty decent. That's actually very close to what you're supposed to. But keep in mind, the average Canadian doesn't earn this much. Does anyone care to guess how much the average Canadian is earning in Canadian dollars? Obviously, quite a few of you are international students, so this will be a shot in the dark. But go ahead, right? If you had to guess, what would you say? What is the average income in Canada? All right, so we see quite a few different numbers here. So yes, in Canada, thank you for participating at 40,000, 15,000, 45,000, 44, 35 to 60. So the range obviously depends from city to city. Some cities are a bit more expensive, some a bit less expensive. Good news for you, and Montreal is a slightly less expensive city than Toronto or Vancouver, for instance. It's not the cheapest one, but so it's a bit less expensive. As a result, average incomes are also a bit lower in Montreal. So most Canadian areas or cities, average incomes are between 45 and 50,000. Again, some a bit higher, some a bit lower, but that's sort of the income per year in Canada, right? Again, those are average incomes. Median incomes, which is 50% of people earn more than this and 50% of people earn less than this, are about $5,000 less. So median incomes are between about 35-ish thousand and about 40-something thousand, right? Right around there. So my point is, this is the average income. So, as a student, you might not be making all that much money because you're not, and you're definitely lower than the median or even average income. But keep in mind, most Canadians make quite a bit more than you, right? As a result, $200 per month is just kind of, they're really struggling basically. And again, especially that has been the case for quite a while before the pandemic. And it turns out that also 25% of Canadians retire with debt, right? So forget about retirement savings. These are people that literally retire with debt. So they're clearly failing at budgeting somehow, right? The simple concepts we saw before, somehow those people, it eludes them. And again, this is from 2018 or 2019, I believe, this reference over here as well. Yeah. So you see February 2018. So again, it has nothing to do with the pandemic, has nothing to do with what currently is happening in the world, right? So what does that mean? Why are people so bad at basically managing their finances? You might say, well, maybe this has something to do with it, right? So sort of the consumerist culture, if you will, in North America, Canada, US especially. And this is obviously Black Friday. One of the silver linings of COVID is that they sort of eliminated or significantly reduced the number of in-person Black Friday deals, at least the last couple of years. Probably this year, most of them will return, depending on case counts and whatnot, and depending on the area you're looking at. So, and we'll come back to, is it really a good deal to buy things on Black Friday? Or on, every single year in North America, you have different days when you have different sales, right? So popular sales dates are coming up actually in the next few weeks. You have Canada Day, obviously July 1st. You also have Saint Jean-Baptiste in Quebec, which is on June 24th. Then obviously for the US, you have Independence Day on July 4th. Then you typically will have back to school deals end of August, beginning of September for different things like laptops, school supplies, things like that. You might have sometimes, deals on Halloween, mostly for, costumes and whatnot, but sometimes they'll also have like, spooky deals for whatever, for electronics or whatnot, just for marketing purposes. You'll have it for, for Black Friday, for Christmas, New Year's, etc. So is it worth buying items on those dates? What do you think? Yes or no? If you had to guess, is it really, are those the best deals that you can find? They're definitely cheaper, right, than other times during the year, but are they the best deals? For some, yes, but more often than not, you can find the same item for the same price or even a lower price without having to wrestle with 20 people for the same flat screen TV, right? And I'll show you a couple of websites where you can actually track prices in real time. And, instead of rushing and maybe spending just because you see other people buying a TV, you're like, oh my God, that must be a really good deal. Look, there's 20 people fighting over one box. I must have it, right? Supply and demand, right? And because you're like, oh my God, it's on sale, right? I'm saving $200, but you might be able to save another $50 or another $200 more on top of that if you bought it at a different point in time without having to wrestle anyone, right? Now, this is probably one of my favorite quotes here. We buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like. Now, I'm not saying every person does this or ever or all the time, right? Just be honest with yourself. Go back and mentally look at all the things that you bought in the last 5 years. Can you honestly tell me that there isn't at least one item that you bought and you were really excited when you bought it, and yet it probably right now is sitting in your garage, in your attic, in your closet somewhere, basement, where have you, and you've barely used it, if you've ever even used it, right? Glad you enjoyed it, right? So the point is, our subconscious plays these little tricks on us. And a lot of times, again, humans are herd animals. We like to work with other people and we like to mimic what other people do. Unfortunately, while we can, fortunately, we can mimic good behaviors, but unfortunately, more often than not, we'll mimic the bad behaviors as well, right? So kind of you have to sort of fight your basic instincts in some cases and not fall for the hype. All right, so now just a brief little disclaimer here. That was my little intro. So the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada, or short FCAC, is an independent agency of the federal government working to protect and inform Canadians, and they basically have a regulatory role as well as sort of a more, as I said, educational role, and they sort of oversee parts of the Canadian financial system, and part of their goal is to, again, inform Canadians of what different products are out there. So in today's session, some of the slides that you will see have been provided by the FCAC themselves, and some of the tools that I will show you that you can use for free, such as setting up your budget for free, for example, generating a fully customizable spreadsheet. All of those tools are straight from the FCAC website, and also allowing you to compare different prices or different costs and different fees on different types of accounts, for instance, right? So whenever a slide looks like this, that you'll have a little piggy bank in the top right corner over there, and then you'll have a yellow-orange bar at the bottom here. Those are the official FCAC slides. I'm not allowed to modify them in any shape or form. And as I said, because we've done some recent updates to them, before we were able to share them with you, the FCAC has to sign off on the latest updates. That's why I'm not able to share the slides yet with you. I should be able to share them with you in a couple of days, as soon as they get back to me, basically. Okay. The other slides, for legal purposes, they have to be referred to as my own opinion slide. So a slide like this one that doesn't have that yellow-orange bar, that's my own slide. Okay, I do not hold any official certification as a financial planner or advisor, nor do I claim to be one. So again, examples provided are for informational purposes only and don't constitute investment advice. Again, this is because this is kind of a part of a 17 webinar series that I do. And by the way, if you're interested, you're eligible since even though you're only starting in most of you are only starting in September, you're already eligible to attend the rest of the series if you're interested in learning more about personal finances, investing, cryptocurrencies, housing market in Canada, and all that stuff. And it's happening on Mondays and Tuesdays from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Okay, daylight saving, I should say, EDT, Eastern Daylight Savings Time. I have more of that later on. Okay. So what are we going to look at today? So I'll show you another 3 slides of briefly looking at the theory behind why people are struggling financially. We'll look at some key terms, and then there's going to be a lot of slides of free resources. So we have 52 slides today. I'll probably cover about 29 to 35 of them in detail. The last 10-ish or so slides, 10, 15 slides, are mostly for your own extra reference, like additional information, extra references with extra links and so on and so forth. I usually like to talk in advance so you don't have to scribble, but a lot of the stuff that I'm saying right now is summarized in the later slides that are kind of summarizing this. Okay, could I share any website or exchange house I recommend to exchange US dollars to Canadian? So there are different apps out there that you can use depending on what country you're coming from. Again, since you're asking me to exchange USD to Canadian dollars, again, if you're from the States, there's a whole bunch of options, but a lot of times I know international students also use US dollars, even though they might not be in the States. So it depends on the area you're from. I know one of the sort of pretty decent websites out there. I'm not saying it's the best one necessarily. You can compare the fees. I think it's called wise.com. Let me just double check here that I have the right one. Yes. So this is one that I've used a handful of times. There's a few other apps as well. Venmo works pretty well as well to transfer money internationally. Depending on where what country you're from, and depending on legal requirements, shall we say, more and more people are actually using certain cryptocurrencies to transfer money. But again, I'm not, don't buy cryptocurrencies without understanding that they're highly volatile. I'm just saying, if you're buying certain cryptocurrencies, you can actually, we can transfer up to about $1 million, I think, for about 5 cents or so in fees. But all depends on which cryptocurrencies you're allowed to buy on international exchanges from your home country and use them. So if you want to learn more about those types of transactions, which again, the problem with doing that, with using cryptocurrencies, is that some of them can be very, very volatile. So once you do it, let's say you want to send some money from your home country into Canada, or your parents want to send you some money from their home country to Canada, make sure that you're kind of online live as they're doing it. That way they're buying it and they're sending it to you right away. 5 minutes later, the transaction is completed. and you sell it right away on the market, and that way you're getting away from the crazy oscillations. So the cheapest ways that I know is using certain cryptocurrencies, which again I have a session on that later on in the semester, in like a week and a half from now if you're interested. And that's one little thing that I mentioned and that, or you can ask me at the end if you want, and I can show you some examples. But again, that's the higher risk option, but it's really cheap. Otherwise, yes, use different. You can use different apps. Again, one of the ones that I've used to send money and receive money between Canada and Europe. This is a pretty decent one, but depending on what areas of the world you're looking at, other apps might have better or lower fees still. Okay, so this one's kind of cool because you can say, let's say you're from I don't know, I'm just gonna pick something. Let's say you're sending rupees from India. And another thing too, depending on what country you're sending money from, you see the minimum transfer here from India is 5,000 Indian rupees. That's the minimum, right? And you want to send it in Canadian dollars. And you can basically see exactly what the fees are. And again, obviously compare those fees to whatever else that you're using, right? And if you're happy with the fee or if you're not happy. And also notice sometimes there's a bank transfer and other times you have different types of transfers here. But again, Venmo is pretty decent too in some cases. And there's a few other ones as well, all right? Yeah. And yes, yeah, thank you for answering that question. So yes, and the list of these webinars coming up later. I actually also have these links. I think on the before last slide or one of the slides later on. So this is part of this this series. So if you of today's slides also. So yeah, so here you go. So if you're looking at what other webinars might be coming up for immigration and so on and so forth, you can check those out as well. And there you go. All right. So I'll move on now. So yeah, great questions, by the way, everyone. Okay. And also, I want to make sure that I have enough time to cover the main content up until 8 p.m. I don't mind sticking for as long as necessary afterwards if you have extra questions. If you have to run at 8 p.m. sharp, as I said, this entire session is recorded, so you can just watch the recording afterwards. So I will answer every single question afterwards. But yeah, I'll move on now because otherwise we're not going to get through the slides. But feel free to ask questions. Just I might only address some of them later on. Okay. So we'll look at many different free resources that can help you cut costs. So I hope what I just shared there is helpful to you. And then yeah, we have some detailed slides looking at specific scenarios later on. For example, I have 3 different slides, one from the FCE itself and 2 additional ones with additional information for myself. If you're interested in, if you're interested in buying a car, and basically I'm showing you all the different websites you can use to figure out how much is insurance going to cost you in Canada. To figure out how to figure out what are your costs for your license, as well as registration costs and all those things. But because not everyone is interested in a car, those are part of those slides that I'm not going to go, step by step myself. But you will have them in the slide deck, okay, that you can check out on your own later on. All right. So now for the 2-3 slides on theory before we get to the more fun parts. So this here, yes, for some reason, okay. So this one it didn't load in. So basically, the way to understand this graph here, on the left hand side is the household savings rate. So this is percentage, and it's on the left hand side. So all the blue histogram here, the values are on the left hand side, and those are percent. Okay, so that's 30%, and so on and so forth. So that's a savings rate. Remember, the experts are recommending that people save 10% of their income, right? So 10% of their income, this is what the recommended amount is, right? So you're looking at 10%, this is the amount. Now notice that basically the people that were at or above this amount in savings were basically our, parents' generation, people that were in their 30s, 40s, 50s, etc., in the early 1970s and up until the very early 1990s. And yes, so it's not that people didn't save at all earlier on. It's just there's no data in this particular data set, so that's why it's just blank over there. And this dotted line over here, that looks at what is the Canadian inflation rate, and that's on the left-hand side, that's also percentage. So right now in Canada, we have inflation that is 6.8%, depending on what part of the world you're coming from. This inflation rate might sound very low, about the same as yours, or very high. in most cases, I guess it's on, Canada's 6.8 is relatively low for most other countries. But notice on, by Canadian standards, it's actually quite high historically speaking. We haven't had inflation this high since 1991, basically, right? So the current latest savings rate in Canada is 8.1%. So that's for the first quarter of this year. So why do we care about this? Well, keep in mind, the experts are recommending Canadians save about 10% per year, right? So over here, any guesses why people were saving? Actually, let's look at the 70s and 80s and 90s. How come that people were so good at saving over here? Why were people so good? Any guesses? How come that people are so good at saving in that particular decade, and then their savings rate dropped significantly? And if I had the data on this here, it would have been about like this in the 30s and 40s and 50s. So it was like around. Again, I don't remember off the top of my head where exactly the peaks were, but it was typically below, mostly below or significantly below that 10% historically as well. So how come? Okay, so Cold War, okay, you're onto something. You're onto something there. So it is geopolitics, and it is to some extent because yes, you're looking at the oil crisis and then Cuban Missile Crisis and all that mess. But one of the main things that actually precipitated this, there's a number of sort of geopolitical events that happened. That's very correct. But one of the main ones was the fact that in August of 1971, the U.S. completely went off the gold standard altogether. So that precipitated quite a bit of inflation in the U.S. and as a result also increased inflation in Canada. And on top of that, you also had the oil crisis and all the other things that were happening at the time. So they're sort of built on each other, right? So because you had high inflation, which we can see over here, right? What's the way that the central bank can actually quell inflation? Well, they raise interest rates, which they're doing right now. So they raised interest rates. So by raising interest rates, what are interest rates? They're the cost of money, right? And as with simple economics tells us, supply and demand, right? When something costs more, people use less of it. So if money costs more to borrow, people borrow less. If you borrow less money, right? You also spend less money. You're more likely to save the money. And as it costs you more to get a mortgage, get a line of credit, get a student loan, the bank will eventually also start paying you more for your savings, right? How many of you have a savings account? So again, just if you feel comfortable sharing this, it doesn't matter if you have 1 cent in it or $1 million in it. If you have a savings account, give me a little green check mark. If you're looking at the participant menu, you have these little interactive buttons. You can click. There's one little green check mark. Otherwise, give me a little X if you don't have one. Right? My guess is most of you probably have a savings account. Again, some of you might have a lot more money in it than others. Right? But here's the question: regardless of how much money you have in that savings account right now, how many of you have a savings account that pays you more than 1%? Now, obviously, depending on what country you're from, quite a few of you might have savings accounts that pay you 5, 6, 7, 10%, maybe even, right? But those are typically savings accounts in your local currency, which might be devaluing at a faster rate than the Canadian dollar because inflation in your home country might be 10, 12, 15% in some cases, right? Even in the US, you have inflation rates around 8.3%, I think, or thereabouts, right? Which is not that much higher than Canada, but it's a little bit higher. So you'd expect savings accounts in the US to pay you more than those in Canada currently. Yeah. But here's the question: what if I gave you a savings account that paid you 20%? If your savings account paid you 20%, would you try to save a bit more money? How many of you would try to save a bit more money if your savings account gave you a guaranteed zero risk 20% payout, right? Well, turns out that in the 70s and 80s, savings accounts paid between about 12 and 18, 19% or thereabouts, right? Mortgages also cost you around 20 to 25%, right? So it would be the equivalent of buying a house with a credit card, like the equivalent of in terms of costs. So what does this have to do with budgeting? Well, is that the economists, the experts are telling us, save your money and make it work ideally for you long term. So invest a good chunk of it that you don't need for at least 5+ years. And that way you can have a higher rate of return than ideally than in what inflation is, right? And you can see here, inflation historically has been sort of trading, at least in Canada, has been in this 2 to 3% range, right? So anything that you see here in the yellow portion, that specifically looks at deflation. So every single time we have dips into this yellow, like if when the inflation numbers dip in the yellow, that means the economy is actually shrinking, so you have deflation. You can see we've had very few instances of deflation in Canada, financial crisis over here, and then obviously with COVID in March of 2020, we had a bit of a dip. But typically we've been staying above, so we've had inflation, not deflation. And on top of everything else, the green bar here shows you what is the minimum and maximum rate that the Bank of Canada is trying to maintain. And they were pretty good at maintaining it very close or slightly below their target rate until, a few months ago, basically, where it's sort of gone parabolic. If you're looking, if you're using the Canadian experience as your benchmark. So right now it's the red line, and that's quite a bit, about 3 times, 2.5 times as high as what they're sort of aiming at. Right? So why does this matter? Well, because when you have high inflation, when things cost more and more and more, budgeting properly matters even more, right? Budgeting is always an essential approach to properly managing your finances, but especially when prices are going higher and higher and higher, and they're very unlikely to, inflation is very unlikely to drop below 5% in Canada for at least the next year or so, year and a half, 2 years maybe. Again, I don't foresee, and most economists don't really foresee, rampant hyperinflation or anything like that. So it's nothing to be very worried or very scared about, but it's still important to plan accordingly, right? All right. So why do people struggle financially? Well, some of the reasons I kind of already pointed out, right? People don't track their money. So, and then if you don't track your money, at a point in time when prices are climbing ever higher, you become that much more, you become that much more likely not to be able to make ends meet, not be able to afford things. Remember earlier when I was telling you that 48% of Canadians are living within $200 per month of not being able to afford their living costs? That data was from 2019, right? 2019 inflation was in the low 2%. It was like 2.1, 2.2%. Right now, prices are, 3 times are growing by an average of 3 times that. And if you're looking at specific prices, like if you're looking at gas, it more than doubled in the last year. If you're looking at meat, it went up like 40, 50%, depending on the type of meat you're looking at in the last year, right? So individual items have gone up by much more than 6.8%, right? So very important to track your money. If you don't track your money, a lot of people tend to live beyond their means. They tend to spend more money than they should, and they don't even notice where the money is going, right? And they utilize debt ineffectively. In many instances, yes, if you're going to just use debt for pure consumption, right? And especially consumption that is not necessary, right? When you could buy very similar items for half price, or especially if you're using a bit of sort of strategic thinking to make sure that you buy those items primarily when they're on sale, ideally only when they're on sale if possible, right? Then using that just for consumption and racking up 20+% credit card fees and whatnot is not a valid option. That being said, if you're able to use your credit card strategically to make sure you don't charge more on your credit card than you're able to actually afford to pay off in full by the end of the month, like, by your 1 or 2 business days before your due date, then using your credit card is an excellent way of spending money, provided that you're not tempted by the fact that your credit card provides you with money. Because whenever you're spending money on your credit card, you're just basically borrowing from your future income, right? You're just saying, well, I'm going to just use this credit card to pay for something that I'm going to then reimburse the credit company in X number of weeks from now, right? So it's perfectly fine to use a credit card if by the act of spending money on the credit card, you're not tempted to overspend. Research suggests that most people tend to spend between 20 and 30% more on a credit card than if they're spending money with cash, right? Because there's something called the pain of paying that subconsciously, if you're actually handling real money, physical currency, you're more likely to think twice or three times over before buying an item that might necessarily be necessary, and you're just buying it because, remember that quote I showed you earlier, that it's just we're buying things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like. Because if you're just buying money with either cash or with your Interac, your regular bank card, if you don't have the money in your account, well, you're not buying the item, right? So it's all about knowing yourself and being honest about it. Some people should probably stay away from credit cards or get a credit card with a very low limit and make sure not to max it out and just buy things that they're able to pay off. If you're able to handle it responsibly and you're not tempted to overspend just because you have the credit card, using a credit card, using debt effectively is an excellent way to boost your credit score. And why do we care about a good credit score? Well, because when you boost your credit score, you will then eventually be able to qualify for lower interest rates on a mortgage, on a car loan, on a line of credit. Again, what does this have to do with budgeting? Remember, budgeting is the basis of all of this. Just starting and ending with budgeting is not going to be a recipe for much success. Those people that are struggling financially, those half of Canadians that are $200 away from not being able to pay their bills, and those 25% of Canadians that are retiring with debt, let alone forget about savings for their retirement. They actually have active debt, right? A lot of them are not just people that are just spending left, right, and center on flat screen TVs and buying a new iPhone every single year, right? There's nothing wrong with buying a new iPhone every single year if you really, really want to. It's not necessarily very environmentally friendly. And I mean, replace the word iPhone with any other electronic that is not necessary, right? Oh, great. The company is trying to be, Samsung, Nexus, whatever. They're trying to be, they're more environmentally friendly. They've eliminated the charger from the box. Yet they're trying to sell you a brand new phone every single year. Well, what would be more environmentally friendly? Get rid of the charger from the box, right? Don't waste the chargers, or stop selling me or convincing me that I need a new phone every single year, and maybe make your phones so that they last more than 1 or 2 years, right? But anyway, that's beside the point. My point is, it's interesting to look at what companies are saying and how they like to portray themselves versus what their underlying consumption setup makes you. It's like, oh, we have these amazing new products. Look, now we have a better camera. We have more memory, more whatever, more processing power, right? But anyway, that's beside the point of today. So yes, using debt, if you use it effectively, that can be a good thing, and you can boost your credit score. And if you're boosting your credit score, you might be able to lower your interest on a mortgage by 0.25, maybe 0.5%. So you're lowering your interest by that amount. And you might be saying, well, why on earth would I care if I'm lowering my interest rate by 0.5%? It's just 0.5%. Who cares? Well, it turns out that 0.5% on a $1 million house, right? Over that you're going to pay off in 25 years, compounded, right, over that amount of time. Well, it turns out that actually ends up being over $100,000, right? So would you rather spend an extra $100,000 in interest and send that money to your bank? Or would you rather take down $100,000, invest it for yourself, and have it then compound and grow in your own investments at 7+% per year, right? So it's important to understand how everything is related here. And people also misunderstand risk. And especially when you're looking at risk in Canada, one of the most massively misunderstood risks in the last 2 years. Okay, let me see if you know what you're getting yourself into by coming to Canada. What is one of the largest investment risks in Canada right now has been as a result of what has been happening over the last 2 years? Which asset class, which type of investments represent a massive risk right now compared to historical averages on the subtypes of investments that you have? Let's see if anyone can guess. Housing mortgages. Perfect. Yes. Housing has gone completely off the deep end in Canada. House prices make absolutely no sense. All right. Now, as a matter of fact, in many areas, house prices have already been correcting significantly since the peak that was reached in late February, early March of this year. Right. There are many areas around Toronto, for example, or more in the periphery. So if you're looking at Whitby, if you're looking at places like that, Oakville, where prices have dropped already between 15 to about 35% in the last 2 months. right? And previously, prices had gone up by between 45 and 55% in the last 2 years. So I know a lot of Americans are freaking out because their housing has gone up by 15-16% last year. Well, Canadians, we've decided to just completely lose our minds. Okay, so this is not sustainable, and again, right now we're seeing that massive correction. Now, does this mean that every single piece of real estate is going to drop by half price? No, that's not what it means. It just means right now there's a lot more risk in the system. So just because real estate historically, typically long term goes up, doesn't mean that it'll go up no matter what. Someone needs to have the money to buy that, right? If you want to learn more about real estate, check out my sessions on that. People misallocate their money, right? So a lot of times people will have thousands and thousands of dollars just sitting there in a savings account or checking account, paying them 0.2% when inflation is 6.8%. Great. Your account pays you 0.2%, inflation is 6.8. Good job. You're just losing 6.6% of your purchasing power per year. I guess it's better than losing the full 6.8%, right? So obviously, you need those emergency savings for at least 3 months, right? You don't want to be investing or speculating with money that you need to pay your bills, money that you need to pay your rent, money that you need to pay your tuition. That's a given, right? But look at the broader picture as well, right? And then people don't appreciate exponential growth, and I'll have a specific example later on to show you about that. Actually, here, I'll ask the question now, and I'll show you the answer afterwards. The average person in Canada works around 40 years, so 35 to 40 years. Well, let's go with the longer term here, 40 years, right? If you don't go to grad school, you work for 40 years. If you go to grad school, you'll typically work for a few less years, for a few fewer years, I should say. So if you were to save and invest money, and let's say the balanced diversified portfolio gives you about 7% per year, and I have a session on that tomorrow evening if you're interested, by the way, from 4 to 6 p.m. For all of the webinars, by the way, that I'm talking about here are completely free. You don't have to pay anything for them. You can attend as many or as few as you want. Same thing with all the other ones that you find on the Campus Life and Learning website, right? You don't have to pay for them, as far as I know. I don't think there's any paid ones in there. So historically, balanced diversified portfolio generates 7% per year, right? Yeah, there you go. Thanks, Chris. And you work for 40 years. So the question is here, if you were to invest for the long term, how much would you have to invest every single day at a 7% rate of return per year, compounded, to end up with $1 million in 40 years? So what sum would you have to save every single day, invest every single day for 40 years, right? So think of the number. You can type it now if you want, or type it a bit later. I'll show you the answer later on, okay? So in case you're interested, so as I said, the budgeting is your massive, and this is the end of the theoretical, and basically the next slide, I'll start with the actual tools that you can use, okay? So budgeting, think of it, or the best analogy honestly I can think of is think of it as a foundation for a house. You need a solid foundation. You need to make sure you track your expenses. You need to make sure you're not spending money frivolously on things that you don't truly need. A lot of times, if you don't spend money on stuff that you don't need, not only is it saving your money, but it's also probably better for the environment and better for the planet as well, because you're not just overly consuming stuff that isn't necessary, right? So that's your foundation, right? And same thing, because again, apparently Canadians really love, and I think a lot of people around the world, not just Canadians, really love to eventually own a house, a condo, or something like that. So same thing when you're buying, you're building yourself a house, it's important to have a good foundation, right? You don't want the house to fall down. But if all you have is an amazing foundation, so if the only thing you learn about is how to budget, eventually, I'm sorry to tell you, but life is not always fair. So eventually, the rainy days will come. Something happens, you might lose your job, another war somewhere else might occur. I'm looking at U.S., Taiwan, and / China. There might be some disturbances, unfortunately, there in the next coming 2 or 3 years or so. Geopolitically, it doesn't look so great right now over there. Maybe different global, hopefully not a pandemic, but there's many different things that can happen globally, different natural disasters and whatnot. So you never know what might happen to you, to the company you're working for, or to your own specific instance, right? So those rainy days, if they when they show up, you want to be able to be protected from the negative fallout, right? And again, if all you have is a foundation, you're going to be stuck out in the rain. It's not very comfortable in those cases, right? In my analogy here, so you need something to protect yourself, to shield yourself from those rainy days. Emergent savings would probably be the thing for most people that you would have, unless you have like massive other income from other sources, right? So typically you need those emergent savings. So at least 3 months worth of emergent savings, 3 to 6 months in most cases. But the emergent savings themselves don't just magically poof into existence, right? It requires that you budget properly and that you use debt effectively. You don't over indebt yourself, but in some cases, again, if you can use it strategically to boost your credit score, and credit scores and debt are very much intertwined, right? So using debt effectively initially allows you to have some advantages. For example, in Canada, we have a lot of credit cards that give you different cashback rewards. They might give you free extended warranty, etc. Again, good to use as long as you're not overindulging because of those features, right? So that's why you have to be careful. But by doing that, you can boost your credit score. And then when you eventually you need to borrow some money, whether it's in the form of a line of credit, a HELOC, or a home equity line of credit, or a mortgage, for example, or other personal loans, then you can save quite a bit of money and help you. Those savings can then translate into more emergency savings or more investment funds, right? So obviously for long term, you want to, especially these days, most savings accounts in Canada still pay less than 1%, despite the fact that current inflation is 6.8. Again, they should be going up over the next few weeks and months, but they're not anywhere near inflation just yet. So as a result, long term, typically investing in something or another would probably work for most people, right? It's also important though to understand how income gets taxed in Canada. So there was also, again, these sessions already happened, as you can see here, but this entire series, this is my personal finance series. I offer this every single semester. The entire 17 workshops are offered every single semester. So the workshops that have already taken place, you can always attend them in the fall, in the winter, some whenever you want. And there's a whole bunch of other workshops and webinars in the series here. There's some that talk about insurance, in alternative assets, if you're looking at investment properties or cryptocurrencies, and so on and so forth. So again, we're about halfway through this entire series this semester. So again, today I'm giving this session here to all of you because you're incoming students, but this session is also kind of part of my regular series. So you basically are already attending this one, and then you have these other ones if you're interested. They're happening on on Mondays and Wednesdays from 4 to 6 p.m. And here's the link to the full series. If you're interested, there's still plenty of spots. Again, these are free. You can attend as many or as a few of these sessions as you want. Okay. So we're talking about investing tomorrow. To balance a portfolio, next Monday we'll talk about financial advisors. Then the following next Wednesday we'll talk about children and your money in terms of how do different RESPs work in Canada and all those things, insurance plans, wills, and how can you legally reduce the amount of taxes on your estate. Well, there's also 2 sessions on cryptocurrencies, 2 sessions on regular housing, and 1 on investment properties. All right, so this is your little financial house, right? So throughout, budgeting is just the foundation. The thing is, if you ignore your foundation, eventually it'll crack. And if you don't fix the cracks as you're, moving on with your life, eventually your financial house will collapse, right? So you definitely don't want that to happen. So budgeting, the first step, but an incredibly important first step, never to forget about. So how to stay on track? Number 1, track your expenses, and I'll show you some tools in the next few slides how to do that, how to do just that. Number 2, figure out how you can spend less on the things that you want to buy. Now, most of you are probably aware that some of the large multinational companies out there own other companies that then own other companies, then own other companies, etc., etc., etc. Now, this particular image here, this is a few years old, and since I've taken this, since this image was created, some of these companies have sort of been sold off to some of the other ones. But what I would like you to notice here is that at the core of all these, I think there's like over 200 different companies listed here, and every single one of these are large companies, right? M&M, for example, regardless of where you are in the world, most people will recognize M&M as a thing, right? Or Nestle, right? Most people will know of Nestle, and so on and so forth, like Tide, for example, and whatnot. But at the core, right, they're owned by a handful of companies. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right? There's 10 companies that then own some companies that then own other companies and then own other companies. So why does this matter? It matters because once you figure out that some of these companies own all those other companies, it turns out that different companies like to have something that is called a sales cycle. So every 6 to 12 weeks, some companies have a 6-week sales cycle, some companies have a 12-week sales cycle. It doesn't mean that every single one of those items look at Procter & Gamble, right? They own tens of large brands, and each one of those large brands might have tens of other products, right? So Procter & Gamble has thousands upon thousands of products that are under their larger umbrella, right? So not all of those items go on sale at the same time or necessarily at all, but many of them will go eventually on sale. And when they go on sale, they will have these manufacturer sales that have these 6 to 12 week cycles. So why does that matter? Well, if you can find a website that is able to track those cycles, regardless of what website you want to buy your item from, as long as they're the exact same item, and as long as the sale is a manufacturer sale, not a local shop sale, which is called a manager sale. So if a local store decides to have something on sale because maybe they ordered too many of those things, or maybe they ordered something that is perishable and it's about to go bad, so the manager of the local store is able to just have their sales also randomly, right? But if it's a sale by the parent company, if you can find a website that tracks all of this, well, you can figure out very, very easily when the next sale is likely going to occur. So this website is one of probably the most useful, freely available websites that you can actually use. Okay, so this tracks prices on a little website called Amazon, which I'm sure you've all heard of, and specifically Amazon from these particular countries over here, right? So I'm going to use Amazon.ca just because of this. Can someone type in chat an item that you would buy from Amazon? Anything. Give me an item that we're going to look up and try to figure out if we're going to see a sales cycle. Toothbrush. All right. Okay. Let's try to find something. Can we find a toothbrush? Do you want an electric one or a regular one? I'll look for a toothbrush first, and then we'll look. Okay, here we go. Sonic electronic toothbrush, and this one is apparently $3 off or something, right? And then we'll look for a laptop also. All right. Let's have a look at that one. Okay. So it tells us, well, it's already, notice that it's already $4 off, and you can also apply this extra coupon here, and it'll give you more. And then obviously if you buy 2 or more, they'll give you another 10% off. Again, I don't necessarily know that you need 2 of these, but all you have to do is you just copy the link up there into the tracker up here. You say track. All right, so this item hasn't been along for very long, but you can already see that a cycle happens, right? You notice? It's quite obvious, I think, right? Okay, let's look for a laptop. All right, so this one, I'm just first one that pops up. Asus, it's 9% off. All right, is this a good deal or not? Well, I mean, this is a lower end, like $349, and I can also pick up the other one over here. I just saw a 2,000, like 1,000, this one here. Let's look at this higher end Acer, and we can compare both of them and see how they're doing, right? There we go. Do you notice? Again, there's a cycle. And same thing with this one. Now, these are mostly one-offs, right? If you're buying an electric toothbrush, if you're buying a laptop, you're not going to be buying a laptop every single week or every single month or whatnot, right? Now, the cool thing about this website is you can set it up. Again, always I would recommend create a separate email account, right? And that separate email account will be your quote unquote junk email account that you can use on this website, that you can use whenever you go shopping. Sometimes they'll be like, oh, do you have can we have your email? That way we will send you coupons and whatever. Perfectly fine to do that. Just use a different email. Don't use your own, don't use your personal email. Don't use your work email. Have a separate email for that. again, it's beyond the scope of today, but there's also a session where I talk about identity theft and how to prevent it in today's world, and I can explain it in that session right at the end if you have questions. But yes, so create a separate email account. There's nothing wrong with this website. I'm just saying it's always a good practice to have a separate email account that is completely different from your own main one. Ideally, don't even use your main real name if possible. Use an alias on it. Okay. Now, so obviously you're not going to be buying these laptops X times. So, but I mean, it already tells you. So you can see. Oh, let's say this was a sale for Black Friday and whatnot. You can see clearly this laptop goes on sale every few weeks. There's no point in rushing like crazy. And clearly, it's been around since May of 2021. Yes, it dropped a little bit here. This was probably the Black Friday sale, if I had to guess. Just looking at the timeline here. But yeah, it didn't really do much. But you can also look at other things, non-perishables, right? And again, if you don't have to buy it from Amazon. Keep in mind, most of these, not all of them, but most of these, when you see that cyclical pattern, they're made by their sales at the manufacturer level, right? At the parent company level, oftentimes. Which means if you're able to find the exact same model laptop elsewhere at Best Buy and whatnot, it'll also be on sale. The sale might not be the same. Amazon might still have the best price, or you might find the best price elsewhere, right? But it shows you roughly when that item will be on sale, right? So I know a lot of people love shopping at Amazon, and a lot of people hate Amazon because, it destroys smaller businesses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So I'm not telling you, I'm not forcing you to buy things on Amazon. I'm just saying you can use this tracker in combination with Amazon's price history to figure out when items are likely to go on sale, not only on Amazon, but elsewhere as well, right? So let's say I'm just going to use this one just because I know that this one has a very, very sort of obvious sales cycle, okay? So you see deodorant, Axe deodorant, okay? So obviously this is much more of a consumable item, right? Hopefully you don't have to replace your laptop as often as you have to buy deodorant, right? Hopefully the laptop will last a couple of days longer. So again, it goes on sale. You see this cyclical pattern. You can also notice that there's a slight spike now because obviously with a bit of inflation. So right now this one is actually, it's a really good price for Canada. I don't know where you're, depending on what your local area is, a $3.97 deodorant might be incredibly expensive, right? For you locally. I'm just saying for Canadian prices, that's a pretty decent price over here, right? So what I was saying before, you can add your email over here and literally tell it, well, once the price drops, and let's say right now we were on the uptrend here, instead of having to check every single day what the price is, you can literally tell it, once the price is below $4, you enter your email, you say, once the price is below $4 or whatever amount you want, you say track, and it'll send you an email message saying, hey, that item is on sale right now. And you can do this with as many items as you want. Okay? So very, very useful little website. That I found that it really kind of helped me stop trying to time, should I buy this on for back to school or deals or whatever. Very, very useful website in general. Okay. So track your expenses. Find ways to spend less money. So that's one example. I'll show you other tools in the next few slides as well. And then eventually, you also want to increase your income. Now, the key thing is when you're increasing your income, i.e. when you're getting maybe a scholarship on top of what you already have, or maybe once you graduate and get a real job, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The key there is to avoid lifestyle inflation. What does that mean? As you're earning more money, right? You want to make sure that you're also increasing your savings and you're also increasing your long-term investments, right? So it's okay to treat yourself and live in a nicer place, maybe buy yourself a car if you cannot afford to buy one when you're in grad school. That's perfectly fine, right? Just buy it once you graduate, once you get a real job, right? But should you buy a six-figure car, or can you get away with a cheaper car or maybe a used car, right? And then invest the difference. And again, key there is invest, at least have some money that you set aside that you're investing for the long term. If right now as a grad student, all you can afford is just make sure that I'm not going into debt, that's perfectly fine. Just get into the habit, try to set aside $1 per month. I'm fairly certain most of you can figure out $1 per month. Why? What's the point of $1 per month? $1 per week if $1 per month is too little, or as high as you want to go. Why do this? Well, because if you do it, it's all about getting in the habit, right? So looking at these small amounts over long periods of time, it actually really adds up really quickly. Okay. Oh, actually, I just realized I forgot to show you one thing at the bottom here, just because there you go. The annotation was blocking my thing. So here you have a very useful 56-page activity booklet, right? That you can use on your own this evening or tomorrow when you have a bit of time. Okay. I want you to do one little thing here, right? Fill out the information from memory on pages 3 and pages 4, right? Obviously, this might be a bit tricky if you're an international student. You might not necessarily know yet how much money you're spending in Canada. But let's say those of you that are local and you already know roughly how much you're spending, fill this out. Otherwise, try to. This is sort of your estimated budget without actually looking at how much you're actually budgeting, right? So thinking, well, how much do you think you're going to be spending on X, Y, Z? Or how much do you think you're currently spending if you're already living in Montreal on those items, right? So fill this out. And then what I want you to do is track every single expense that you're making for the next at least 1 month. The experts are recommending 3 months, as we will see in 3 slides from now. But I would say do it for at least a month. Why 1 month instead of 3 is because most people typically give up after about a month and a half or so of doing this, right? The example I usually use is if you're looking at people that have New Year's resolutions that they want to get back in shape. How many people join the gym in January? There's a ton of new members in the gym in January. Those of you that go to the gym regularly, you will have noticed that. And most of those people have disappeared by the second week of February, right? So the point is, yes, it's recommended to track your expenses for at least 3 months. That way you can average out more sort of random expenses on more unusual expenses, but do it for at least a month and do it right. And basically in advance, try to guess how much you're currently spending or how much you think you will be spending. Then actually track the expense for a month and compare the actual amounts that you spend versus the amounts that you expected to be spending. I guarantee you there will be at least one, if not more, categories which will surprise you in terms of how much money you're actually spending versus how much you thought you will be spending. So that will be a good indication of what you might be overspending on, okay? And that might kind of highlight things that you should probably cut back on, okay? And then after that, obviously, make sure to stay within your budget once you figure out exactly how much you can afford to spend on those items. All right. So what are the parts of a budget? Well, obviously, we have the income. Most of you will probably have 1 or 2 different income sources. So you might TA a little bit, and you might get a scholarship or a stipend from your supervisor, right? Or you might be working part-time. So 2 or 3 income sources. So there's not that many. Expenses, however, we all have tens of expenses every single month. Some are large, like your rent payments. Some are quite small, like, everyday purchases, right? And then obviously the difference between the two is if your income is larger than your expenses, then you have a surplus. And if your expenses are larger than your income, then you will have a deficit. So obviously we want to aim at a surplus. And then, as I said, even if the surplus is just $1, right? Try to get in the habit of initially creating a emergency savings account, right? With that $1. If it's $10, so be it, right? I'm just giving you an example here. It's all about getting into, developing good habits, as it were, okay? So here are some examples of how you can make sure that you stay on track and to make sure you're not overspending. So obviously, and by the way, so this is an official FCAC slide, and you can see some of these are maybe a bit dated. That they're saying record every expenses in a notebook or electronic device. Again, I'll give you some resources also from the FCAC, but also from other places that you can actually use that allows you to track those expenses, right? You can review your bank and credit card statements to make sure no one else has sort of been using your accounts. Again, they recommend to do that for at least 3 months, but as I said, do it for at least a month, ideally for 3 months if you can, okay? Make a list of irregular expenses such as gifts, donations, car or home repairs if you have any, vacations, etc. And then you can average those out roughly what they would be, like how much money would you have to save up every single month for those, right? And then total your expenses at the end of the month. So again, you're doing this, then you can figure out, okay, now I know that I have a budget of $2,000 and I'm spending 1,950. Okay, so I have 50 bucks to work out with, okay, to work with. All right, so if you have $50 to work with, that means make it a priority that going forward, you're not going to only put away the $50 at the end of the month. Now you saw how much money you're spending. You know already that you'll have $50 left over at the end of the month. So then every single paycheck, put away $25 or whatever, $23 and change, right? Because every paycheck, if you're getting paid every 2 weeks, you're getting paid 26 times per year, etc. So you can kind of adjust that. So it will be $50, right? If you that's $600 a month, $600 per year. 50 times 12 gives you 600, and you divide that by 26, because if you're getting paid every 2 weeks, so that would be $23.08 basically, right? So $23.08 every paycheck, right? And that's what that is. Okay. This is the exact same. This is literally a print screen from that section of that little handbook that I showed you. So the parts that we covered today are in that PDF handbook from the FCAC itself. We're probably going to cover the first 15 or so pages out of the 52. There's a few pages, there's like 10, 15 pages talking about how to manage your debt. There's a few pages talking about investments as well. And again, if you're interested in investments specifically, I have a few more webinars still taking place this semester, literally one of which is tomorrow evening, if you're interested, from 4 to 6 p.m. That goes into way more detail than what the booklet goes. So if you want to learn more about that. And then, there's also fixed and variable expenses, which again, you see them in your little booklet, and try to, again, write those from memory, or at least guess. If you haven't moved to Montreal yet, try to guess what you think you should be able to afford. And then once you see what happens to prices, again, right now, because inflation is quite high, 6.8% on average for everything, right? But it also means that certain items will be going up by like 10, 15% over next year, unfortunately, right? So see exactly what that ends up being. So your fixed expenses are typically the expenses that will stay more or less the same from 1 month to the next, right? So everything will be posted. So the slides will be sent to you once the FCAC tells us that the small changes that we made are perfectly fine. Otherwise, I will have to remove the 1 or 2 slides from of the new content and just send you the old ones. And then everything is recorded. So I hope that answers the question. And yes, if you're interested in the other webinars, I will post the links even today if you're interested. Okay, in a little bit. And then your monthly expenses, these are variable and irregular expenses. Obviously here you have eating out and groceries. Now these, when inflation is less high, these you can almost convert into fixed expenses, but the reality is, depending on your dietary restrictions, prices for different items will go up and down throughout the year. For example, vegetables, if you're vegetarian or vegan, many veggies are way cheaper during the summer because we're able to grow them locally in Canada, versus in the winter they will be significantly more expensive. For example, you were able to buy, like those large, the long English cucumbers, right? You'd buy like a 3-pack for like $6. They were like $2 per cucumber back in January, right? Because the only ones that were available were imports from Mexico or California. Whereas right now, because we also have local ones that are started to grow in Canadian greenhouses, right now you can buy 3 of those same cucumbers for, I think they're like $2.50. So they're less than $1 each. So less than half price, despite the fact that inflation for most other items has gone up since January. Some items are a lot cheaper in the summer than in the winter, for example, and vice versa, right? So obviously, depending on your own restrictions, your own goals in life, etc., you might have more or fewer of these variable versus fixed expenses. But these are just examples here. They're giving you typical numbers. Now, keep in mind, these numbers are from 2014, 2015, I believe. So with inflation, it's okay if you're a bit higher than these. Just try not to be like 10x every single month. And I already explained to you what a surplus versus deficit is, right? And last thing here, before I show you some additional tools, important takeaway: shelter is your largest, or will be your largest monthly expense if you haven't, or if you're not already spending money on your, you're not already paying for your own rent. And basically, this is data from 2012, but things are still very much the same. Like, yeah, the numbers might have gone up a little bit since the last 10 years. But what this does is it's looking at the 20% lowest income Canadians, the next 20%, the next 20%, the next 20%, and then the 20% highest income Canadians. Ignore the income taxes thing, right? So the way to read this this graph is on the left-hand side, you have the bar graph readings, right? So this here, for example, right, food, that's food for the Canadians that are in the 20% lowest income bracket. Their food was basically about $4,800, $4,900 in 2012. Whereas food for the 20% wealthiest Canadians, they spent about $14,000, $13,000-ish dollars. So about 3 times as much as the 20% lowest income Canadians, right? But so you can see that's sort of the third largest expense, typically second or third largest expense. But the largest one, again, ignore the income taxes bit. The largest one, except for the income taxes bit, is shelter, right? The red one, right? So, and this is averaged out between rents and mortgages as well. Okay, and obviously since then mortgages have gone a bit on the crazy side. So, what's the take home here? If regardless of what income bracket you're in, right? If you're able to reduce your largest expense, which is shelter, you will see the largest immediate impact on your budget, right? So this means that it does pay to do a bit of research in advance to make sure that wherever it is that you're moving, you're getting something that isn't too far away from campus, but it's also not too expensive. So sometimes maybe taking the metro for another 1 or 2 metro stations might be able to save you, $50, $100 or more per month. It really depends, right? In other cases, just, if you're able to get something right next to McGill and you're able to spend, let's say, you might say, okay, you know what? I'll be spending $100 more per month on rent, but at least then I don't have to spend $56 or whatever it is, $53, I think, on the bus pass. Plus I'm saving time. So it's not always only about how much money you can save, but just keep that in mind when you're looking around, right? All right, so the key takeaway here is that you can become wealthy by living within your means, so don't spend more money than you earn, and ideally investing 10% or more of your income long term, right? Short term, as I said, any amount is a good amount to start with. Yet most people spend too much, save too little, pay too many fees in the form of interest on debt because they use debt ineffectively, high management expense ratios on their investments. Again, we will look at that tomorrow if you're interested. And late fees. And they struggle financially for most of their lives, regardless of the level of income that they have. All right, so let's try to fix that, shall we? This is a sample budget, because the sample budget is not a perfect budget because most budgets are unique to your specific circumstances, right? So let's look at this individual here. So this person makes $25,000 per year. Out of that, they pay, I'm just to use simple numbers here, let's say their school fees are $5,000. By the way, to figure out it, in case you're uncertain what your school fees are, this is the tuition fee estimator on the McGill website. Here you go. Okay. So in case you didn't know how much your fees are going to be, again, make sure to select what your residency is. Obviously, if you're a Quebec resident, non-Quebec resident, but Canadian or international, and then you can select for which term, and then you can either specify the program or like, let's say you're going for international students, just click on that, and then you see all the fees. And notice that the fees are very different depending on, if you're doing a master's, a PhD, a certificate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So a very useful little subsection of the McGill website here. So again, this is the assumption I'm making. Obviously, some people make a lot more, some people will make less than this, and so on and so forth. But in our situation, this person has $20,000 left over at the end, once the school fees are paid for. So that's $1,667.67 per month. Their goal is to save 10% of their income. 5% of their income. They cannot afford the 10%. They're going to go with 5% instead. Now, 5% in their case is $104.17. So as I told you before, right? Once you track your expenses for at least a month, you can see exactly how much money that is, right? And how much money you're spending on XYZ, where you can cut. And in this person's case, right, last month they had $17.16 left over. So they're like, okay, I know for sure I will have at least that much. But what can I cut to go from $17.16 that was last month's to $104.17, which is my goal, right? So again, your goal can be anything, can be 1%, can be 15%, can be whatever it is that makes sense to you, right? I'm just taking an arbitrary 5% number here, okay? So let's look at some of the places that this person can cut. First of all, let's figure out, are they spending more than the average Canadian on shelter or not? The average person in Canada spends between 30 and 35% of their income on shelter. So in this case, because their income is $1,667.67 per month, that would be between $625, 30%, or $729 and $17, 35%, right? And this would be shelter. This includes heating. This includes any additional, electricity and so on and so forth. So in their case, let's say they're spending $30 per month. Again, in Quebec, you typically only pay your bill, your hydro bill, once every 2 months, unless you decide to have it equally distributed monthly every single month. But in most cases, if you're living in an apartment building, you typically only paid once every 2 months. But let's say on average, that's about $60 a month. $60 per 2 months, so that's about $30 a month in this person's case. And then their rent is $670, so this is a really small studio apartment, a bit further away from downtown, let's say. So combined, it's $700. Okay, so they fall within that amount. Now, one thing to note is that students, especially if you live close by, you might not have transportation costs. Now, most Canadians spend about 14-15% of their income on transportation. So you're allowed to spend a bit more than 30 to 35% on shelter, provided you're not spending, the 15% on transportation. So you're allowed to kind of borrow from one category to another. That's okay, right? Just make sure that shelter is not overwhelmingly expensive, right? Because then you're probably, you could save a lot more money basically by just cutting your rental cost by 10%, because if you're spending 50% of your money on rent, by cutting that by 10%, you're basically saving yourself 5%, right? 10% of 50 is 5%. With COVID, obviously, it's become very, very clear, if it wasn't already very abundantly clear beforehand, that telecommunication services are pretty much essential in the in the modern world. So this website here, this is not a government website, but it's a very, very useful website nonetheless. Will show you, will basically allow you to track and compare both your mobile and internet plans, right? So mobile, i.e., let me just close that one. Cell phone, your cell phone plan, as well as your just home internet plan. So let's say we want to compare mobile plans. So I select mobile over here. I say search. Make sure to select your province, because different plans will be available in different provinces. So select Quebec. If you already have a provider, you can select the one that you have right now, and then it'll compare all the other plans to your current one. If you don't have one, then say none. And basically, for how many minutes do you want to use your phone, in regular minutes? So obviously, these days, more and more people are using WhatsApp and, FaceTime and all sorts of things. And fewer people actually use the phone for the phone purposes. So again, I'm not sure which one of these would work for you, but let's say you're someone that still uses the regular phone, right? And uses it a lot. So let's go with a unlimited minutes plan. How many gigabytes of data do you need per month, right? So let's say 8 gigs. And then, are you bringing your own phone, or you're purchasing a new device? Typically speaking, if you're okay with buying a mid to lower tier phone, and especially if you're okay keeping it for at least 3+ years, so 3 to 4 years, then buying your own phone, let's say if you're getting on sale on Amazon or Costco or Best Buy when it's on sale, you'll actually save money at the end of the day. If you want to change your phone and you want to get the highest end flagship phones from Samsung, from Apple, etc., and you want to switch it every year or every 2 years, more often than not, purchasing a new device with a 2-year plan might actually be a bit cheaper. So you have to look at kind of run both scenarios and see which one works out best for you. right? But in terms of overall less money spent, it's pretty much always going to be buying your own phone, as long as it's not, it's either you're allowed to buy yourself an iPhone, just maybe buy a used one, or not necessarily the latest model. It can be brand new, but just try to go like maybe 1 or 2 years old type of thing. And you'll save quite a bit more. And then keep it for a few years. Don't change it every single year, right? So this will show you a number of different options that kind of fit your search criteria. What I really like about them is they also mention if there's any upfront costs. Usually when the upfront costs are low, like you have here $10, $15, that's just the fee to get your SIM card. Some places like Virgin, for example, here you can see they'll give you, or Fido, they'll give you a SIM card for free, so there's nothing. When that number is quite a bit higher, I think Videotron, if memory serves, yes, like $45, this is an upfront activation fee that you have to pay. It's a one-time fee. Then they show you your monthly costs. And what I also really like about it, it also tells you exactly how much that's going to cost you over 2 years. Why is that useful? Is because, again, it's very easy to be like, oh, $42 versus $50. Oh, that's just an $8 difference. Yeah, but after 2 years, that's $187 difference. That adds up pretty quickly, right? And you can click on every single one of these to kind of see all the details, right? So you can click on it there, and then they'll break that deal down. Oh, sorry. This actually brings you straight to, because I clicked on view offer. I should have clicked on the details over here. So you can basically see exactly where the fee goes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, what you get, and so on and so forth. Now, you can either use this website to straight, as I just did it before, straight go to the website of the company that offers the deal and get it. Or the way I personally like to use this website is to basically save the page, or like bookmark the page, and then in Montreal, in Canada in general, a lot of malls will have these little boutiques, or these little counters. Sometimes in the middle of the mall, sometimes it's a little store in the mall itself, where basically you'll have people from Fido, from Telus, from Kudo, from Public Mobile, from Rogers, et cetera, from Bell, and so on and so forth. And they'll be there, and they'll offer special deals sometimes, right? But those special deals might only be the exact same deals that they have here. But you might be able to go there and basically say, hey, look, I'm looking for a cell phone plan. This website shows me that, look, Virgin's offering this plan, or Fido's offering this plan for $40. I see your equivalent plan is $65. Can you offer me anything better than them, or can you match it? So it's a strategy. It doesn't necessarily always guarantee that you'll necessarily get a better deal, but going in person and kind of strategizing with them this way might actually allow you to actually lower the fee even further compared to what they might be offering you in person in the store. Right? And sometimes what you see online on their website is a better deal than what they offer in store, because sometimes, again, the store might offer a special, manager's deal. I would say check both their website online, this website also, to see what the competition offers, and then the store itself. If you already have a plan, if you're near the end of your expiry of your 2-year term, let's say, you can also use this website to basically look what the competition offers and call up your provider. Always ask to either talk to the customer loyalty or customer retention department. So some companies call it customer loyalty. Some companies call it customer retention department. You don't want to just talk to the first person that answers the customer service line, because those individuals typically only have a limited number of things that they can do. They'll be knowledgeable, they'll be nice, but they won't necessarily be able to create a custom plan for you. Whereas if you're asking to specifically speak to customer loyalty or customer retention, those people, their main job is to make sure that companies get to keep their customers. In most cases, it can cost a company anywhere from $50 to a couple $100 to get a new customer, because a lot of times when you're getting a new customer, you might offer them a lower introductory rate, you might offer them a free phone or a whole bunch of other benefits. Whereas if it's a returning customer, then just lowering the monthly bill by $5 or something like that, it costs you $60 per year, but it's still cheaper than spending another $100 or $200 to get a new customer, because the current one is leaving to go to your competition. So very useful little trick to use, and you can again always be nice, be respectful, but sometimes, as they say, you catch more flies with honey, right? So something to keep in mind. Okay. You can also use this whenever you're trying to negotiate a lower, for example, car insurance or health insurance plan or something like that. Obviously, you cannot use that particular website, but there are other websites out there that you can use to compare insurance products. One of them would be ratehub.ca, for example, for insurance. So ratehub.ca. Another one is Canetix, I think. Canetix, because someone's asking me about insurance. And then same idea, right? If your insurance is about to expire, you can, or you're about to get one, you can just say, well, look, can I speak to customer retention or customer loyalty, blah, blah, blah. And your competitors are offering XYZ. Can you match it? Or why should I stay with you? Like, what's better? Why should I pay more for more or less the same service, right? And see what they say. All right, so this person, they spent $80 on cell phones, $50 on internet. Obviously, we haven't looked at internet specifically, but you saw there were a lot of deals, a lot of cell phone deals that were less than $80. So they could easily save $30 at least here, right? From what I've showed you, right? Again, they spend about 15% on transportation. So obviously this can get broken down in, if you're looking at your Opus card, that's your bus/Metro Pass. So here's, if you want to get more information about the Metro Passes themselves, here you go. Notice that there's this 4-month pass. So as long as you actually use the Metro Pass on an ongoing basis, buying it for 4 months in a row will be a little bit cheaper than buying the monthly pass. So the monthly pass costs you $54. If you're buying the 4-month one, I think that drops it to about $51, $52 per month or thereabouts, right? So you save a couple of bucks per month. It's not a huge difference. Now, obviously, with COVID around, I would probably say hold off on the 4-month pass. I don't think we're going to have to deal with lockdowns again. But there's a high probability that there will be some localized outbreaks once the winter comes along again, unfortunately, for at least the next couple of years, right? So what I'm hoping is that they're going to say, okay, now you have to wear masks indoors again, and but they're not going to actually be shutting down the universities. They're not going to be shutting down stores again. But again, I have no idea what variant we might be dealing with by this late fall, early winter. So again, the 4-month pass. Historically, when you're not dealing with that level of uncertainty, that saves you a couple of bucks a month. But maybe because of that uncertainty, risking $212 for saving $2, it might honestly be worthwhile. Although I think the STM was pretty good at sort of extending those bus passes and those Opus cards when the system was shut down. But again, it depends on a few. It depends on exactly the circumstances, basically, right? And you can check this out to look at what the registration fees and license fees are for cars if you're going to be using a car. Right? I'm not going to bother showing you, but you can click on the links. Other useful little website here to compare gas prices. You can use both. You can use this both for Canada and the US, and then you can basically zoom in. And it'll show you what the latest, and you can also download the app if you want. It's a freely available app, whichever one you want. Now, obviously, don't drive halfway across Montreal just to save 2 cents on gas. But this is especially useful for the few times you might be outside of Montreal driving, going different places. For example, if you're driving along this route here, you see, right, you're driving this way. So then, don't fuel up here. If you have enough gas for another 3 kilometers or something, you might be able to save 5 cents per liter, which is, it adds up pretty nicely. So a useful little website that you can use there as well, or again, download the app if you want. Most people spend between 10 and 15% of their income on food. Some a bit more than that, again, depending on your dietary restrictions, if you have any. And then about 5% on clothing and gadgets. So these are roughly the numbers that this person in this hypothetical budget that they're spending, okay? Now, how about entertainment? I didn't include anything for entertainment. Well, one of the most useful little tools that you can find in Montreal is this card called the Access Montreal card. It only costs $8 a year, right? And all you have to do in order to be eligible for this is you have to live on the island of Montreal, right? As long as you live on the island of Montreal, you're eligible for this Access Montreal card. So you can click here to see the full advantages. So they basically the city of Montreal has 70 different partners to give you various discounts. Now, the really cool thing about the card is that it stacks on top of already existing student discounts. So a lot of times, if you're a student, if you have a valid student ID, you'll have discounts for a number of things, including, the metro. I just showed you the metro costs $54. If Are all these websites that compare prices on different categories always up to date? Yes, they are. Sometimes for most of the data there, right? So for example, the Camel website, that one again tracks real-time data on Amazon. And I think sometimes they might have a lag of like a few minutes or maybe about an hour or 2 hours. So sometimes if a sale goes on right now, it might take them a bit of time to update the price drop. But within a few hours, that's pretty decent. When it comes to some of the websites I'll show you a bit later, that kind of compares different fees for different savings or checking accounts, for example. Those ones are typically only updated once a month or so, and they are typically updated by the companies themselves, by their HR department. And they kind of update it in the database of the FCAC itself. So sometimes those might be probably the least up to date. They might be they might not have been updated a month or 2 months ago or something like that. But most of these are typically, yes, up to date. This one, the City of Montreal, because you see this is Montreal.ca website with the Access Montreal card. Again, the list of this, they usually update this once a month or so. Notice how the last one was updated literally today. So they'll show you a whole bunch of different things, what are the discounts and so on and so forth. Okay, so there you go. I hope that answers the question. Now, obviously, on top of this, if you also get a cashback credit card, for example, where most of your things will pay you, let's say 1 or 2%, you can literally save an additional 1 or 2% on all of your spending, and you get it in a form of cashback rewards. And you can basically then take those 2% cashback rewards and funnel them back into your savings, right? So for example, in this case, if you're taking all the items that are here that would be eligible to be paid by a credit card, in most cases in Canada, you cannot pay your rent, unfortunately, by credit card. There are a few exceptions, but in most cases, like 99% of the time, you won't be able to pay it via credit card. But most these other things, you can pay them with credit card, right? So like this hypothetical credit card here would give us about $14.42, literally in cashback rewards for buying the stuff you're going to be buying anyway, right? So this person's able to almost double their last month's savings by just using a good credit card, right? And then obviously cut another $30 from your cell phone bill, maybe cut a few dollars here and there as well. And you can very easily see how this individual might be able to turn the $17.16 in leftover money into potentially $90 or $100 plus, right? As was their goal. And what am I talking about here when I say automatic transfer? So again, look at how much money you have left over. Look how much money you want to save. Let's say this person's goal is to save $104.17 per month. So then you take that amount, you multiply that by 104.17, multiply that by 12, right? That gives you $1,250.04. And now divide that by 26, right? That's if most people get paid every 2 weeks, and that's basically $48.09 and 8 cents. Sorry. So then, literally set it up that your checking account automatically transfers $48.08 from your checking account into your high interest savings account, or if you have any high interest debt such as a credit card debt, pay an extra $48 every 2 weeks into that, right? All right, so this kind of summarizes what I've just been saying, so I'm not going to this is literally one of those summary slides. I'm going to skip it. Let's now spend the next 5 minutes or so looking at, this is sort of the main tool for today, okay? Here you go. So this is straight from the FCAC website. This allows you to basically mention what is your situation. So let's say you're single, what's your age range? So let's say you're starting your master's, so you might be like 23 or so. You're a student. Most of you will probably be renting. And what's your goal? Stay on track, save more money, cut my expenses, reduce my debt, create my first budget. So, okay, so let's say it's create my first budget. And the reason you have to select these, depending on what you're selecting, it'll it will generate a slightly different Excel spreadsheet for you afterwards. Okay. So again, select whatever makes sense to you. I'm just giving you the random example here. Obviously, you can also skip this step and just have a standard default one that isn't customized, right? But if you want to customize it, that's what you do. Then you say start. Now, here you go, right? The very first section is obviously income. And if you have any doubts in terms of what type of information you should be entering at any point in time, just hold your mouse over these little question marks here, you see? And it kind of explains to you exactly what it is. You have the ability to say, okay, how often do you get paid? Do you get paid semi-monthly, every 2 weeks, monthly, quarterly, every blah, 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 blah. So select whichever makes sense. Again, most people typically get paid in Canada every 2 weeks in most circumstances. If you have a salary or you're TAing, etc., and then you can basically write down that amount, right? And then enter any other amounts that you have. If you have other sources, let's say you're also TAing or whatnot, you can add an item. Say here, TAing, and then again every 2 weeks, and you can say, well, I'm making $100 every 2 weeks or whatever it is, right? So you can add as many as you want, right? There's no limit. Okay. Then what I really like about it is you have this very next section after the income section is your savings, right? You make your savings kind of they should be top of your mind, right? So it's like, it's your first priority, looking at the long term, right? And basically you mention, okay, how much money am I putting in any of these accounts, or do I want to put in any of these accounts? So you write that in, and then you have your expenses, and then they break down all of these expenses into a lot of detail. So obviously, I don't think you need me to explain to you how this goes. You just, click through these, enter the sums that you're actually spending. And then this generates a very comprehensive, nice little set of graphs on the next page. Obviously, because I haven't entered any information, this graph makes no sense right now, right? It just kind of shows you stuff like this. Now, here you have two choices. Choice number one is to export this. And you can export this from the get-go. If you don't want to enter this information while the thing is on the government website, you don't have to. You can just literally export it like this, and then you save it inside of your inside of your account, and then you basically just open that up. Here, let me just open it like this, and let's have a look at what that looks like. Okay, so this is what it looks like, right? And now, because I've already included some information, already has some information, but if you rather not enter any of the information while it's on the website, you can literally just download the blank spreadsheet that is not customized, and you can just enter all that information on your own. Again, it's free. You don't have to create an account or anything like that to get it. Okay. The other option is if you want to maintain it on the website itself, and you can just literally save this unique link somewhere. Right, that's the other option, whichever way you want. Okay, and here it'll also tell you some things like, you're not saving any money, blah 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 blah, and what they're recommending. Okay, and you see they're saying the average range is 5% or more. Again, it's recommended 10% or more, but 5 is really, as we've seen statistically, the average long term in Canada is about 2.78%. Currently, it's 8.1. But that's mostly because of the pandemic, and people are spending less money than they would otherwise have been. There's another little sort of subsection of the FCAC website that has additional tips that you can use to save some money. Okay, so I'd advise to at least skim through this. They'll also be they'll be reviewing and repeating some of the items that I already mentioned today, but they have some additional information as well. So maybe go through this and have a look if you can find anything that might be of interest. Okay. And then obviously the holidays are about 6 months away. So this, let's just try if I can see. Sorry. No. Because this is a straight download. So you'll be able to use it on your own afterwards from the slides themselves, because this forces me to download it on my computer. I'm just trying to copy the link. So this is another spreadsheet that you can kind of organize your holiday budget around if you celebrate the holidays, the winter holidays and exchange gifts, that is, right? Because not everyone does. All right. Now, depending on what app you're using, what bank you're banking with, sometimes different bank applications we'll try to help you save, different amounts of money by kind of making it into almost a game, right? So for example, you can set, again, not every single bank will have this. Some will have more options than this one. This is just one example, right? So some of them might use some of these, some might have more, but this particular one, basically you have this 52-week challenge where basically if you activate this, the first week it'll transfer $1 from your checking account into your savings account or whatever other account you tell it to transfer it to. The second week it'll transfer $2, the third week $3, etc., etc., etc. So it kind of every single subsequent week it adds an extra dollar to it. You can do increments of $2 if you prefer, but that's what it does. Okay. Again, the whole pay yourself first. I already mentioned that those are sort of the automatic payments. Every single paycheck you set aside a certain percentage or a certain amount. You can also tax your habits, so you can basically set it up that every single time you pay with your debit card, let's say you're paying coffee or you for coffee from, let's say, Starbucks or whatnot, or every single time you're buying yourself, I don't know, an ice cream or something, every single time you do that, you can set a certain percentage. By default, it's 2%, but you can set it higher, you can set it lower, that it transfers an extra amount from your checking account into your savings account on top of that transaction. Okay. So all sorts of these things. So they're trying to kind of gamify savings, if you will. Okay. So this might be useful to some, less so to others. So what are some of the areas that you can save? Well, number one, make sure to check your bills to make sure that you're not overpaying. I already talked about negotiating lower fees, so this is kind of a semi review plan here. I showed you specifically examples of how to lower your cell phone bill. Regular landlines, obviously, I don't think any of you will really be getting a landline anymore these days. So as I said, these are a bit dated slides, but what have you. I have a slide a bit later in like 3-4 slides from now, like 5 minutes from now, that I'll show you how to lower your banking fees. That's a comparative slide that you can use on the FCAC website itself. And you can also review different ways to kind of reduce your grocery bills. I have a few slides again later on that talks about this, so we'll revisit that. By checking your bills, you can also make sure that you spot any mistakes or overcharges, pay less in late fees. Obviously, ideally, you wouldn't pay any late fees or any interest or any penalties. That's the ideal thing, right? Use your credit card, ideally only when you're certain that you can pay it off in full. Sometimes life happens, and the only way that you have money to spend is to use the credit card. And that's okay. Just make sure you make at least the minimum payment for every single time, 1 or 2 business days before the due date, right? Never miss a minimum payment, right? Ideally, pay it off in full, but if you cannot afford to pay it off in full, because again, life happens, at least make the minimum payment at least 1 or 2 business days before the deadline, okay? And then get errors corrected before it's too late. You typically have 1 month or month and a half to correct any errors that pop up. So make sure to check again, it's rare that they will, I very rigorously check my credit cards. Maybe I'll spot a mistake once every 10 to 15 years or something like that. It's incredibly rare these days with everything being digitized that I ever see any mistakes there. But they do happen occasionally, like once every, as I said, 10 plus years. You can, and again, this goes back to negotiating plans, which I mentioned before. You can try to negotiate plans a bit lower. Typically, be polite, ask to talk to customer loyalty or customer retention and all of that. Talk about, if there's any ways to bundle your deals. Sometimes if you're bundling your services, you might pay less. But honestly, these days, it used to be that if you got your, let's say, high-speed home internet with your home cable bill and your home regular landline, you used to get a cheaper deal on all three. These days, most people only have high-speed internet and then a cell phone plan. The cell phone plan most often than not will be with a different company than the other one. So bundling is less a thing these days. But yes, most companies still offer bundling services. But realize that just because you're bundling something, it is cheaper to bundle than not to bundle at the same company. Going with one service at that company and with a different service at a different company might still be cheaper at the end than the bundling option. Okay. You can also ask them if you foresee having any issues paying your meeting your obligations and making your payment. You can basically see, are there any ways, look, I'm gonna have some, like, let's say my scholarship or fellowship payment didn't come through. It's gonna be delayed by 1 or 2 weeks. Is there any way to avoid having to pay these interest penalties because that happened, blah blah blah. I'm not saying that every single time you talk to the bank they'll necessarily be willing to negotiate something, but again, worst case scenario, you spend 20 minutes on hold. You ask them if there's a way to kind of eliminate or reduce the interest. They say, sorry, sir or ma'am, there's no way we can help you with that. And that's it. Best case scenario, they might say, oh, you know what, fine. You so far you've been making your payments for the last X number of years. So if you're about to be late with one payment a few days or whatever, we might, not charge you interest or lower your interest rate or whatever it is, right? Now, obviously, in order for that to work out, you have to have been with that particular company for at least a little while. Just signing up for a new account today and then expecting them not to, to give you, to do you favors 2 days later is not going to work so well, right? Just think about it. It's kind of human nature, right? If you have a friend that you've known all your life for the last 10, 15 years, right? And they're asking you for a favor, you'll be much more likely to help them out with something than someone that you just randomly met in the street. That person that you randomly met in the street might be a lovely person, might become your best friend 3 years from now or 2 years from now or whatever. But right now you don't really know them, right? So you're much less likely to, to sort of give them, be open to kind of do them any favors. So keep that in mind, okay? So we'll look at, on the very next slide, we'll look at how to reduce your banking costs. Now, one of the main banking costs that used to be around maybe the last 5-10 years or so, where a lot of people, grad students and undergrads specifically, they used to go to an ATM and only take $20 or $30 or $40 out at a time. Now, because of the pandemic, fewer and fewer people are actually using cash these days, and probably cash in Canada will probably disappear in the next 5 years or so, if I had to guess, right? Everything will just become digital eventually. So that's less of an issue these days. But again, be aware, if you ever need to take money out from an ATM, make sure to go at the ATM from your financial institution, and ideally go with the financial institution that has unlimited ATM transactions in their network. Don't go outside of the network, because that's when you typically will have $1, $2, $3, and sometimes $5 fees on top of everything else, right? And then if you have to use it, take out larger sums. That way, as a percentage of the total, the fees are not crazy. Now, imagine you have one of the highest fees cards out there. You're going outside of the network and you get charged, let's say, $5 in fees, but you're only taking out $20. That's a 25% fee, right? Just to take out your money. That's ridiculous, right? You can also ask if you can get a reduced fee if you keep a minimum balance. But again, there are many account types out there and different financial institutions out there that will offer you accounts that don't require any minimum they don't lock in any amount of money for you at a bare minimum, right? So try to go with one of those probably. So here you can use this account selector tool to sort of compare and contrast different accounts that are available, okay? We have maybe like 4 more slides to go, and then the last, as I said, 15 or so are mostly for your own reference, just so you know, okay? Because I'm looking at, we're running out of time a bit here. Here we go. So in this case, what you want to do is you want to, again, make sure you select your province. And let's say you want to compare your, what do you care about? So your checking account, right? You want to see a number of transactions. Now, a lot of times students will be tempted to say, oh, well, I'm a newcomer to Canada because I'm an international student, or I'm young, or I'm a student. You can use those later on, but first try not to limit yourself in terms of what accounts are available. Try to run a more broad search and see what gives. You can also click here on show more options filters to, for example, what is the maximum monthly fee you are ready to pay. So if you want to eliminate everything, all accounts that charge you a fee, you can just put it to 0, and then only the accounts that don't charge you a fee to have it open will show up. But again, I'm not going to select those, but you can select those if you want to narrow it down more. So let's here, just looking at checking accounts, 53 different checking accounts are available in Quebec, and here they list a bunch of banks. So let's look at Tangerine. I'm gonna also pick, just because it's the first one up there. Let's see Desjardins, and let's look at. Can I see any? TD Canada Trust. There you go. TD Canada Trust is Canada's second largest bank. Desjardins is Canada's largest credit union. It's about the 6th or 7th largest financial institution, if you were to look at it that way. And Tangerine is a relatively small online bank that is fully owned by Scotiabank. Now, every single one of these banks, or sorry, both TD and Tangerine, which are banks, and the credit union, which is Desjardins here, are members of CDIC. So the main thing, if you don't have a Canadian bank account yet, the most important thing is whether you're opening a bank account or a credit union account, the main thing is make sure that your bank or credit union is a member of CDIC. Do not open an account with any bank or credit union that is not a member of CDIC. Now, what's CDIC? CDIC stands for the Canadian Depository Insurance Corporation. So the Canadian Deposit Insurance Corporation, what is it? It's a crown corporation. Basically, it's a company that belongs to the federal government. And if you scroll down, you can see the Canada Bank, Government of Canada logo at the bottom here. Honestly, this short video, the 2 minutes and 41 seconds, it's fairly entertaining and explains very nicely what they do. But in short, every single one of their members, in the very unlikely event that whether it's a big bank like TD, which is Canada's second largest bank, or Desjardins, which is Canada's largest credit union, or Tangerine, which is kind of a mid-size-ish, smaller-sized online bank, every single one of them are a member of CDIC. So in the unlikely event any one of them goes bankrupt or is not able to give you your money back for whatever reason, up to 100,000 Canadian dollars per type of account per bank / credit union is insured by the federal government. So the federal government will give you your money back. It might take 1 week or 2 for this to happen, but it's insured by the CDIC. So you can see exactly here how the coverage works. And you can also see the full list over here. So basically just make sure that your bank or credit union is in this list, okay? And just to show you, TD is here, Tangerine is also here, and Desjardins, just because I picked 3 randomly there. You see Desjardins is over there as well, okay? All right, so sorry. So that's the one thing. And then how do you use this little tool? So it allows you to compare how many, it basically shows how many transactions can you make. Well, for the Desjardins one, transactions are not included. So you have to pay extra per transaction. Tangerine, unlimited transactions. TD, you have self-serve 10, in-branch 2, right? What is the monthly fee? No monthly fee, $3.95 monthly fee over there. In branch, how much money do you have to pay if you're taking it from an ATM from the same institution? This one's free. This one costs you $150. This one costs you $125. How much do you have to pay if it's an ATM from another institution? $150, because again, that's not Tangerine charging you, it's the other institution. Same thing here, $150 in the US, and so on and so forth, right? So depending on how you want to use it, different banks would be ideal for different people. Another thing too to be aware of, Tangerine, for instance, one of the downsides is you cannot really send and receive money internationally, so they don't have a SWIFT number. So if you need for international transactions that you don't want to go via Wise or like some of those other online apps and whatnot, financial apps, then yes, go with one of the big banks, right? But for daily maximum sort of transactions minimum fee, some of the online banks will probably offer better deals, okay? And you can do the exact same comparison here by comparing savings accounts instead of checking accounts, right? So that's just a matter of here selecting savings instead of checking, press search, you have 28 different options, and you kind of see what the options are and so on and so forth, all right? All right. And then, even the government here says, digital services, mobile wallets, and other applications may offer convenient, inexpensive alternatives to traditional banking. So it's not just me saying it, it's even the government saying it, right? So again, they talk about bundling. We saw that already. Here are some examples. I just have 2 more slides I wanted to cover today, and we have 5 minutes left. How to save on food. So eat breakfast at home. So these things are kind of very obvious, but again, if you're looking at how do you magically end up with a ton of money later on in life, little pennies and dollars here, especially when your income is not that high, make a huge difference, right? Bring your lunch, drinks, snacks, etc., coffee. Cook one big dish on weekends and freeze the rest. It's cheaper to to cook in bulk than having to cook every single night, etc., etc., etc. Now, another thing that you have to be very careful about and very conscious about is how much are your sort of perception impacted by, how much is your behavior impacted by your perception of getting a good deal or a bad deal. For example, you have this MacBook Pro over here at $1,550.89. So let's say you're shopping in one store and this is the price of it. And while you're still in that one store, let's say you check prices online, or maybe you overhear someone that they say, hey, you know what? Across the street, there's this other store that they sell this same computer for $1,529.89, right? So the question is, how many of you would bother going to the different store to basically save $21? Just show me a little show of hands, real quick here. Would you bother going to a different store if you're already there in person to save the $21? How many? Who would bother going to save the $21? Anyone? Okay, one person, two. Now, what if I flipped this and said, okay, right now you're not shopping for a computer, but you're shopping for a pen. This pen is $42 in one store. And then while you're in the store, you realize that you can buy the exact same pen across the parking lot in a different store, right? How many of you would now, and look, oh my God, it's $21 instead of $42. That's a 50% savings. Wow. How many of you would now want to go, right, to a different store to buy the same pen for 50% off, right? We're conditioned to look at percentages, right? This percentage here, these $25, this $21 divided by 1,550 is like a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of a percent, right? But in reality, your pocketbook, your savings account, your checking account doesn't care that you got a 50% reduction or a 0. whatever percent reduction. What it cares about is, did you spend those extra $21 or not, right? So whether you're saving 50% that saves you $21 this way, or whether you're saving 0. whatever percent and it saves you $21, this $21 is equivalent to that $21, right? So very important to look at what is the actual savings versus not just the percent. Don't focus on the percentage. All the stores are like, oh, 50% off, right? Look at the actual money that you're saving, right? Or not spending, I should say. So yeah, this also kind of gives you additional ideas in terms of how to save on your groceries. Again, the reason I'm not covering this is because this stuff is fairly straightforward. I would highly encourage you to read through these next few slides. I have a lot of different links to different places where you can save some extra money. The last slide here that I wanted to show you, and I have a few more slides about this as well, but here's an example. Another thing that is kind of quite useful in Canada is to use, and again, I'm finishing with this. So President's Choice, or PC Financial, is another one of those smaller online banks. They also offer, and they're sort of co-owned, or they have a deal with Loblaws, if you will. And Loblaws is basically a company that owns Loblaws, Maxi, Provigo, and a few other grocery stores. So if you typically sign up for one of these PC Optimum point cards, and you don't need to get their credit card to get the PC Optimum points. It's just that if you get the credit card, you also get even more points than that. So I myself, that's one of the credit cards that I use, not the only one. So once a month or so, once or twice a month, they'll send me one of these. It usually ranges between $15 and $20, right? So this 25,000 points to 20,000 points. So 1,000 points, the way these points are redeemed when you're trying to redeem the points, 1,000 points equals $1, right? So 15,000 points is $15. So what they're saying here is that if I'm spending $100 in groceries, or at their store, they're going to be giving me an additional 15,000 points on my account. Now, a lot of times, depending on what you're buying in the grocery store, certain items you will get like twice the points, or 5 times the points, or 10 times the points. So just from points alone, and notice this was a relatively recent deal here. So like a week and a half ago or so, when it was last time that I actually used these points, I had like 60,000 points saved up from before. So that's $60 worth of merchandise. So I basically spent 60,000 points. then the bill itself ended up being $124, I think, right? Out of that $124, they didn't have about 3 or 4 of the items because I ordered this online and then I just went to pick it up at the store. Sometimes you get free delivery. Some places you have free pickup. Sometimes you might have to pay like a couple of dollars to pick it up, like $5, $2, something like that, depending on what store you're looking at. But so in my case, it cost me $124. They didn't have a few items, so then the revised bill ended up being like $89, right? Out of that $89, $60 were the points, so minus $60 in points. So I personally only paid $29 out of pocket for that entire grocery bill. Then I received plus 15 points, $15 worth of points, or 15,000 points from the basic one here. Plus some of the items that I bought had they were these $11 bags of shrimp that gave you $5 worth of points just per bag. So that basically added an additional, because I bought 3 of them, that added another 15,000 points, so another $15, plus another, I think I got another 8,000 points just from the other deal. So I got 38,000 points, like $38 back. So at the end of the day, I spent $60 worth of points that I had accumulated the previous time I went shopping. So it was $89 minus 60. I spent 29, and then I ended up earning another 38. So all in all, this shopping trip was pretty much, just cost me like $22, and or if you're looking at net in terms of points. So I'm not saying this is necessarily the only place you should be shopping, but it's nice to see, depending on what stores you're shopping at, a lot of stores will have these sorts of deals where basically they'll offer a whole bunch of points if you use their proprietary credit cards, if you use their point system and whatnot. But whenever you're signing up to these, again, sign up with that separate quote unquote junk email account. Don't sign up with your main like McGill email account or something like that. Okay. But that's an easy way to, kind of go get, quote unquote free groceries, as it were. As well, or free stuff, as they like to say it over here, right? And here are the 3 slides talking about, if you need a car. So again, this is just all the later stuff at the end. As I said, these are kind of, and talking about home ownership. I have 2-3 sessions talking about that if you're interested, and a few additional sources where you can kind of talk, learn more about different apps you can download to that help you save a bit of money. Flip is probably the most commonly used app. Due to COVID, they had sort of been limiting the amount of stores that were actually accepting it. Now with the restrictions dropping, they started accepting it. So this is an app that kind of you scan the barcode of an item and it'll tell you instantly if it's on sale anywhere else. And most large Canadian stores, most large Canadian grocery stores will match the price of their competitors, right? Some of them will match the price and even give you a lower 10% discount. That's rarer, but they will usually match the price if it's the exact same item, same barcode as a competitor and the competitor has it on sale currently. So it's a useful little app if you go in person. If you go online, you can use it. You use this approach that I just highlighted here. If you go in person, you can use things like the Flip app. Okay, so there's different approaches whether you shop online or in person. And then yes, different things will be on sale at different points in time of the year. I talked about this. So as I said, these are just your summary slides. And just don't buy something just because it's on sale. Make sure that you're actually going to be, using it. So they used to have these 20 liter giant buckets of mayo at Costco. And yes, on a per gram basis, it was super cheap. But like, unless you own a restaurant, it's just a waste of money, right? You're never going to use that. So, avoid wasting food, and you can look at this little short report looking at, basically not to waste food. So in closing here, so create a budget. So that's a little link to the budgeting tool that I showed you before. Pay yourself first. Distinguish between what is actually necessary and what's just a nice to have, right? You need some form of cell phone or some form of, electronic device you can get a hold of people, right? That's a need. Do you need it to be top of the line, whatever, right? Fill in the blank brand? No. Are you allowed to buy yourself a fancy phone? Yes. Just the most fancy stuff you buy, the more fancy stuff you end up having and less money you end up having at the end of the day, right? So when grocery shopping, always use a list, never shop hungry. All of these things kind of make sense. Again, this is just a summary of what we've seen before. So in closing, budgeting is an important first step, but just first step to the road to financial stability. Properly budgeting can help you achieve both short and long-term goals. And once you have positive cash flow, so basically you have more money at the end of the month than you have, then you start out with, set up a financial plan. And don't, never forget that small changes can have a massive impact down the line. And I asked you at the very beginning, remember, I asked you how much would you have to save every single day? So the rate of return, 40 years here, we're looking at 7% rate of return compounded. The answer was $13.43 per day every day. That's roughly $94 per week. So if you manage to invest $94 per week for 40 years at 7% per year, you end up with $1 million at the end of the day. So this is the slow way to become a millionaire. If you want to become a millionaire faster, just save more. Now, if you say, well, this is a ridiculously high amount of money, well, keep in mind, $94 per week, that's only like $4,900 per year. Remember, average income in Canada is between $45,000 and $50,000. Again, as a grad student, you're not making that money. As I said, as a grad student, it's fine if you're not able to set aside 10 or 5% of your income. That's okay, right? Just once you graduate, hopefully you'll make at least the average Canadian income. And at that point in time, that's all you need. It's basically the average Canadian income, save 10% per year, and that's how you become a millionaire in 40 years. You want to become a millionaire faster, save more and invest more, I should say, right? And here's the link one more time to the full financial series if you're interested. And if you want to sign up to those sessions, right? There's still 9 of them left in this series for the summer. There's also, if you're interested in entrepreneurship, I have a 1.5-hour session this Friday at between 10 and 11:30 a.m. Eastern, if you're interested about that. And then there's also a couple more webinars coming up from, and lastly, this here is a short video that I've had on my YouTube channel for the last 2 years. And it's showing some of the tools that I showed you today, i.e. the price, the FCAC account comparison, account tracker tool, right? So that's a useful little one. But it also will go through, so it shows it to you in the first 15 minutes or so, but you can also skip down kind of halfway through it. I'm kind of showing you how to use other tools that we didn't have the time to go over today, and that's the credit card comparison tool and a few other things in terms of strategies to pay off debt and whatnot. So you can kind of go through this if you're interested. Okay, and here you go. The last 2 things I'll mention here is the Know Your Student and Legal Rights. Very interesting webinar coming up on June 15th from 6 to 7 p.m. Another one, Grad Health 101, on Tuesday, July 5th at 6 p.m. And the link to that is the one that was already shared a couple of times before, but here you go. And then if you need to contact us, feel free to send me an email. My email is on the very first slide of today's session. There's some additional resources, and you'll have the slides so you can look at these later on. And this is where you can get in touch with Campus Life and Learning. And apologies for, again, going about 10 minutes over time. You had some really good questions earlier on, though. So again, I hope you found today's session useful. Now I'm just going to go and have a look if I missed any of the questions. Let's see. I think I answered all of them, but just to be on the safe side, let me just double check. Any other questions in the meantime, as I'm just trying to catch up with the questions that might have come in there? Awesome. All right, well, yeah, so I think I've answered pretty much all of them. So I hope you found it useful. And thanks for sticking around for the extra time. I'm going to turn off the recording right now.